Hello, and welcome back to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and we are once again untangling ties. We're going to talk about the rest of the document options for ties. In the previous video, we talked about the top half of this window. Now we're going to start talking about the bottom half of this window. And I'm actually going to start with the bottom, the break for signatures options. Let me just zoom in here a little bit so we can see this a little bit better. I have some ties going through some time signatures, some key signatures and everything, just to sort of demonstrate what's going on here. So let me open that document options once again. And for break for signatures, you have the options to break for time signature, break for key signature, or you can uncheck these, one or both of them, and it will not break for signatures. So if I uncheck both of those, you'll see that the ties will draw straight through the time signature. It will draw straight through the key signature. Or if you check one, it will break for key signature, but not for time signature. I'm not sure why you'd not want to break for time or key signatures, so I think you should probably just keep those checked. And then what you have here is the left and right gap. And again, this is just going to dictate how much space goes between the end of the tie and the time signature. You can see here in this 3/4, that gap is about 0.04 inches. So if we just change the time signature gap, let's make it a lot bigger. Let's make it like 0.8. For the left gap, you can see that that gets a lot bigger. We can do that here, but you do have to be careful. Sometimes you can make the gap so big that you can almost make the tie disappear. I don't know if you can make it out, but there's just two little tiny nubs of a tie right there to the right of the 3/4. So you just have to be careful with those values a little bit. If anything, if you want to make them a little bit tighter, maybe that's the way to go. Make these 0.03 instead, just to get the ties just a little bit closer to the time and key signatures. Now, when it considers the time and key signatures together, it's just one break. You can notice in this B flat going to 4/4 here, there's plenty of space between the end of the key signature and the time signature. You'd almost think you could actually get another piece of the tie in there and then break again, but it just considers it all one thing. It's just one big box. And the reason why this big gap is here is because we have the bigger time signature or key signature here in the clarinet part. So it just has to be like that in order to align the time signatures. So sometimes you will get some weird scenarios like this where the gap just looks really weird. Let me just reset this and go back to normal. The other thing I want to mention is that, Finale doesn't do any kerning. And what I mean by that is that when things like this happen, when you're trying to avoid something, it's basically not avoiding the actual ink here, as it were. It's avoiding a rectangle around it. And if I draw sort of a rectangle around this key signature, you can see that when I eventually go there, that top tie is running into that rectangle. That's why that tie is not going any further. And it's not going to go any further into that rectangle because it just has to stop. You can see the second tie down, like that's stopping at that value, that gap value before the time signature or the key signature. The top one is basically lining up with that as well. So, there's no kerning. What you'd expect is that this tie might actually go a little bit further into the key signature before it breaks, but Finale just doesn't have the capability of doing that. Interestingly, the same thing happens over here. It sort of looks like the tie can definitely cross through the top of that key signature and the top of the time signature. There's plenty of space. It seems odd that it would break the top tie here. But again, I just think sometimes these rectangles are a little bit bigger than the actual key signature here. So if the box is here for that key signature, if you keep drawing that tie and it's starting to go down, it'll just cross into the top of the right-hand top of that box. So it does have to actually add the break. And when it does add the break, it has to add the break to match the other ties. So that's why it looks so weird. It looks like there's plenty of space there, but actually it's breaking for both the key and time signature here. But what you should know is that you can turn these off individually. So if you go into the special tools and go into the tie tool here, and you just take that top tie, for example, first of all, I believe if you just draw it high enough, it will eventually stop breaking because it'll get outside of that box. But if we go back to normal, the other thing that you can do is just right-click that and go to Edit to get to the tie alteration for this one particular tie. There's other things you can do with the placement and the tie contour and everything individually for this one tie. But the other thing you can do is break for time and break for key instead of default meaning it's going to set it to whatever the document options are. You just turn it off and it will not break for that key or time signature, just for that one tie. right? If we were to replicate this exact scenario again later on, it would break in that exact same place. But for this one particular tie, I've turned that break for signatures off, and so now it will actually draw through. Now, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the middle section of the document options for direction. And this has to do with chords and mixed stems. And we're going to have a long discussion about chords. So buckle up, this gets a little bit technical. There's only 3 options here and 1 sub option, but it's a little bit confusing to understand what's going on here. So hopefully I can explain this, and hopefully this will make sense to you. So when we talk about the direction of ties on chords, basically what we're talking about is whether the tie arc goes under or over, right? So in these chords here, you see the outside ties are going over, the bottom tie is going under, and then the middle tie is going under, right? Well, with chords, the outside ties are always going to go over and under regardless. You can see in all of these chords, the outside ties go above and below, right? It's really the middle ties that we're concerned about. We're concerned about manipulating the direction of those middle ties. And you can see that in some cases it's going under. There's 2 under here. There's 1 over, 1 under, 2 over, 1 under, 2 under, 2 over, right? So that's what we're dealing with these chord settings for the ties. We're not talking about the outer ties. We're talking about the inner ties and which direction they're going. Now, there's 3 options. This stem reversal and opposing seconds option is checked by default. Let me read to you from the manual what stem reversal means. Select stem reversal from the drop-down list to set tie direction on chords based on the stem reversal point of notes on the staff. You can modify the stem reversal point in the staff setup dialog box. I will show you that in a minute so you understand what that is. Ties on the top and bottom notes of chords always curve in opposite directions. This is what I was talking about. The outside ties always go over and under, right? Ties on inside notes at or above the stem reversal point go over tied notes. Ties on inside notes go below the stem reversal point, go under tied notes. It's these last 2 sentences that are really important. Ties on inside notes at or above the stem reversal point go over tied notes. That means the arcs go up. Ties on inside notes below the stem reversal point go under tied notes. So let me show you what I mean by the stem reversal point, or let me show you what finale means by stem reversal. For that, we have to go into the score manager, and we'll go into the piano part, we'll go into the right hand, and over here on the bottom right where it says staff, standard 5-line staff, if you actually choose other, you can manually set up the staff in a lot of different ways. I've covered this in a completely different category, so maybe you can go there if you really want to learn more about this. But you can actually change the number of staff lines, do custom staffs. There's a whole lot of stuff you can do here. But the one option we're concerned about here is this stem reversal point. You see that it's set to -4. Now the values here, 0, 1, -1, etc. Those are values based on from the top line of the staff. The top line of the staff will be 0. The space below that is -1, the line below that is -2, the C space is -3, and the B line in the middle is -4. So this is saying that the stem reversal point on this 5-line staff is the middle line. And the stem reversal is the point at which the stems reverse. So you can see that in this case, any stem that's at or above the stem reversal point, the stems will go down. Any stem below the stem reversal point, the stems will go up. And it's indicating that here in this graphic, the B stem is going down, the A stem is going up. You can actually change this. If I make this -3, you'll see that the stem reversal point now becomes the C, and that B stem will always go up, and C, D, E, F, etc. will always go down. You can change that to -1, and the stem reversal point will be way up on the top space there, right? Normal music is set to -4, or the middle line. So this is the stem reversal point. So this is what I'm talking about when we talk about ties. They're saying the stem reversal point instead of B because you can manipulate the stem reversal point in this window. So that's what that means. So going back to that definition, basically what it's saying is that ties on inside the chords, right, the inside ties on the inside notes at or above the stem reversal point, in this case the B line, will go over. If it's below the stem reversal point, they will go under. So if we take a look at this tie right here, this middle tie, right, this is a D tied to a D. This is well below the stem reversal point, which is the middle line, so the tie goes under. If I just slowly move this chord up, E is still under the stem reversal point, F, G, A is still under the stem reversal point. If I go one more, now that B is at or above, in this case it's at the stem reversal point, so it goes above. And if we keep going up, that middle tie goes up. So this is what's controlling which direction that middle tie is going in, right? So far, so good. So let's go back here and let me just briefly talk about opposing seconds. Now, what the opposing seconds option says is that if you have inner ties where the, sorry, not even inner ties, if you have ties on a chord where there are seconds, the ties are supposed to go opposing. In other words, one tie will go under, one tie will go over. Now, what's interesting is that if you look at this chord here, the C, D, F, G tied to C, D, F, G, this is not happening, right? What this opposing seconds option is supposed to do is that the C and the D tie are supposed to go opposite each other. So this D tie is supposed to go up. The F tie is supposed to go down so that it opposes the G tie going up, right? But clearly that's not happening. Let me just show you manually what that's supposed to look like. If I just manually flip the F and D tie, this is what's supposed to happen. And interestingly, up until version 27.4, when you tied these two chords together, this is what it looked like when the stem reversal option plus the opposing seconds was selected. This is the result that you got. Now, this is sort of a long time bugaboo in Finale that you would get this, so they've actually fixed this. But the fix is a little curious because it's, you know, basically, let me just undo that so you can see how the ties now appear, right? The fix is curious because it kind of goes against the logic of these two options. The opposing seconds is supposed to override any of the stem reversal settings for the inside of the inside ties. And again, the D is supposed to go up, the F is supposed to go down. But the fix is just sort of an exception to this rule when you have this particular scenario. So even though opposing seconds is selected here, you're not actually getting opposing seconds. Another thing I want to point out about this stem reversal, stem direction situation is if you look at this last two chords here, what you'll see is that the inner ties, there's two inner ties on these two chords, right? And on the low chord, both of the inner ties go below. The reason is because both the F and the D are below the stem reversal point. The D and the F on the second chord are both above the stem reversal point, so they're going above, right? Again, if I were to just move this first chord up a little bit, again, they're still both below, and now that the B is at or above the stem reversal point, now they're split evenly, so the top one is above and the bottom one is below. And we keep going up, still split, and then on the next one, now both ties in the middle are going above. So that's the result of that stem reversal setting for the chords in terms of tie directions. Now, if you set to split evenly, this is the other option here, and hit apply, these two chords in particular are going to switch, and they literally are going to split evenly. That's what that option says. And when you turn off the opposing seconds, which actually doesn't really matter quite as much now with the fix, this is basically going to also fix this. So I used to recommend in previous versions of Finale to set your ties to split evenly and uncheck opposing seconds. And basically it would look like this. All of your ties would look like this. They would sort of attempt to split evenly amongst the chords. Now, obviously, there are some chords where you have to make a decision, like when you have an odd number of notes in the chords, like this chord right here, that middle tie has to go in a certain direction. In this case, it's going up. And when there is that odd tie in the middle, Finale is following the stem reversal point rule, right? So if that middle note is at or above the stem reversal point, the tie goes above. If it's below, it goes below. So you can see here that middle tie is on a B, so it's going above. If I were to shift that chord down a little bit, that middle tie is an A, which is below the stem reversal point. So now that middle tie goes under. So you can get two different configurations here depending on where those notes are in the staff. Now, one other thing to point out, with the split evenly opposing seconds turned off settings, basically you're getting the tie configuration for chords as recommended by Elaine Gould from Behind Bars. She basically recommends that with chords you want to split the ties evenly above and below, just like this. Interestingly, the one minor detail that it gets wrong is that Elaine Gould says when you have an odd number of ties, that middle tie is supposed to go opposite the stem. So in this particular case, this B tie, I know I'm getting really super technical here, this B tie is supposed to go under because that's opposite the stem direction. In this case, it's going over because it's at or above the stem reversal point. It's such a minor detail. Again, if you shift this chord down one step, this will, again, perfectly follow Elaine Gould's rules because that middle tie is going opposite the stem, right? So this setting here, split evenly opposing seconds, is really pretty darn close to what Elaine Gould suggests. And then finally, let me talk about the last option here, outside inside finale 3.7. Let me once again read from the manual. The manual says, this selection has been provided for compatibility with previous versions only. Older files converted from before Finale 97 have this option set. So I think in Finale 97 they introduced these other two options. In Finale 3.7 they introduced the options that you see here, which will dictate the direction of the inner ties on chords. What's hilarious to me is that with this option checked and with opposing seconds unchecked, that inconsistency with Gould's rule about this middle tie doesn't exist anymore. And basically, these settings follow Gould's rules perfectly. I think. I literally have not checked every possible scenario of chord ties that exist because it's almost infinite, I think. But I believe when it's set up like this, it should follow the Gould rule. So again, here that A tie is going underneath because it's opposite the stem. If I go up another one, see that B is now at the stem reversal point, but that tie is still going underneath. With the other setting, that tie would go over, but it's still going underneath opposite the stem direction according to Gould. And then once you flip that chord a little bit higher, now the stems are flipped downwards, so that middle tie always has to go above opposite the stem. So interestingly, with this old outside-inside finale 3.7 setting and opposing seconds turned off, this follows the Elaine Gould rules. Go figure. Let me just go ahead and reset back to normal here. And let's talk about the mixed stem options. There's three options: over, under, and opposite first stems. And mixed stems, this has to do with ties when there are stems that are going in the opposite direction. So in this left-hand part here, I did a bunch of these so you can see this stem goes up, this stem goes down, this stem goes down, this stem goes up. Each of these ties are going into stems with different directions, right? There's three options here. With the over setting, what it's saying is that every scenario where the stems are mixed, the ties will always go over. And you can see that in this case. All of these ties are going, the arcs are up, right? If you choose the under option, it's the opposite. In this case, all of the ties will go underneath, just like you see here. And then there's a third option here, opposite first stem. If you hit apply here, what you'll see is that it will go on basically the note head side of the first tied note. So the C here, the note head side is here, so it's going under, this one's going over, this one's going over, under, right? So you can get a slightly different result from the opposite first stem settings. Now, I have seen a lot of published music that basically uses the over-only rule. So this is a perfectly legitimate setup, and this is the way that Finale sets this up out of the box. So I personally think it's totally fine to keep it that way. However, the opposite first stem option is a little bit closer to what Gould recommends. Interestingly, Gould actually recommends these ties going over or under based on the stem reversal point. Which is something that we talk about here with the chords. They don't give you that option for the mixed stems, and that's exactly what Gould is recommending. Again, what she's saying is that if the first note is at or above the stem reversal rule, then the tie goes over, but if it's below the stem reversal rule, then the tie goes under. So there is no setting for the stem reversal mixed stems option here, but I think the opposite first stem is pretty much as close as you're going to get. I think the one tie that doesn't, two ties don't work here. I think the E tie here, according to Gould, this one should go over, and I think the D tie should also go over because it's at or above the stem reversal rule. So and the C should remain underneath. So it's not quite there, but I think it's a little bit better to choose the opposite first stem option for the mixed stems to get just a little bit closer to Gould if that's something that you're interested in achieving. Okay, wow, that was a lot. I realized there was a lot of technical stuff involved here, and it's a little bit confusing. Hopefully I've cleared things up or made things at least interesting for you. But yeah, that's it for document options for ties. In the next video, we're going to get even more technical and talk about the tie contour window right here, which is also just as equally complex. So looking forward to that. Once again, thanks for watching. My name is Jason. As always, please, please, please don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you soon on the next video.